This video is sponsored by you. Links to support the channel are in the description. Hello there, Arknights' most hated YouTuber here. Once again beefing with a bunch of pixels that are beating the shit out of my pixels that I developed an unhealthy attachment to. So DOS came out, and I took my time to play it a good bit, so I could form a proper opinion before just making a slop video about it. And I need to say, it's definitely decent, but I feel the shift from a tower defense mobile game to physical card game extremely reminiscent of Uno was a terribly confusing direction for the Arknights brand to take. There doesn't even seem to be any Arknights branding on the box or cards. I really don't know what Hypergraph was thinking with this one. Oh, and the design of Strife also came out, and it's kind of ass. My opinion on it is about as mild and lukewarm as the average Minecraft update nowadays. Design of Strife is yet another attempt to replicate the success of CC after Hypergraph decided to retire it for literally absolutely no reason. Yet it lacks all the edge that CC had. Design of Strife ends up being just a mediocre mode that simply exists in the game. Not offensively bad like Pinch-Out, but still fundamentally non-functional. Before we get into the main stages, let's briefly talk about Trauma Intervention. It's honestly pretty good. The timer gimmick is actually very enjoyable. It introduces a whole new dimension to the gameplay because now stalling out the timer like a Smash Bros. Sonic player is a viable strategy. It makes some previously kinda ass operators quite great. It's a good gimmick that introduces a great bit of variety, yet it feels undercooked, being relegated to just the side stages. Anyway, about the stages you actually care about, some people call them reverse CC. This is because you have buffs you can apply to the stage to make it easier, contrary to the debuffs you can apply to make it as hard as me looking at Gummy in CC. However, this is not exactly correct. I find the buff mechanic in Design of Strife to be confusing. Not in the sense that it is hard to grasp like a calcite word diarrhea monologue, but in the sense that you can remove it entirely and the mode barely changes. It's supposedly the main gimmick, but contributes about as much as traffic lights in GTA. It's a completely external system glued onto the stages, rather than being intrinsic to the mode. Also, you get less rewards for using them, even for using just one. So in essence, you gave me a bunch of buffs that I'm not allowed to use, defeating the entire purpose of having them in the first place. You have absolutely no incentive to ever use these buffs. You are only punished for engaging with the main gimmick of the mode. This is because if you use even just one, you get less rewards. It doesn't work psychologically either. In CC, it feels like a climb. It fills you with a sense of pride and accomplishment, to add more risks because you're making a baseline easy thing harder for yourself and getting rewarded for it. In Design of Strife, it feels like you're lowering the difficulty like a little bitch. It feels like in Devil May Cry 3 when you die and the game mocks you by telling you easy mode is now selectable, especially when you unlock the option to apply buffs by losing the stage for the first time. This doesn't feel good at all. You're shaming me for using the f***ing main gimmick of the game mode. But at the same time, the stages are built around the buffs, so now you have outrageously difficult stages meant to have those buffs active in a mode that discourages you and punishes you when you activate those buffs. It's like if IS4 punished you for using Full Tartarus. I think this could be easily fixed in the Design of Strife 2 if you rework it entirely from the ground up and essentially make it something else while only retaining the base concept. Let's say there is a stage, let's call it J3. This stage baseline is impossible, just straight up impossible, designed on purpose to be unclearable. Now, before the stage, you are shown a CC-like screen with a bunch of buffs. You have a currency to spend to get those buffs, much like we have currently. But this time, you have a gradual system shown in tiers. Let's call them tier 5 to 0. You start at tier 0 with no buffs, and the more you spend of that currency, the more you go up in tier, to tier 1, then 2, and so on. To get the full rewards, you must be at least tier 3. This rework achieves 5 things. 1. The player is no longer punished for engaging with the gimmick of the f***ing mode. 2. The buffs are now integral to the game mode, as the baseline stage is designed to be impossible, or at least near impossible, without them. 3. The player is punished for using too many buffs. Tier 4 and 5 would give out less rewards compared to Tier 3. Think of this as Risk 18 in reverse, where Risk 17 and below give out less rewards. 4. The player can still choose to challenge themselves for their own pleasure if they choose so. Tier 2 and 1 give out no additional rewards compared to Tier 3. However, they are there for the player to attempt as an extra challenge. Think of this as, again, Risk 18. You get all rewards there, but you can go to Risk 19 and above if you are masochistic enough. And 5. You still retain the customizable difficulty aspect of CC, as you get to choose the buffs, and choose if you want less impactful advantages, but many of them, or more impactful but fewer. This would be, in essence, a true reverse CC. Instead, over here in reality, we are left with bullshit hard stages with no flavor. Where the H stages have to at least get creative with the map layout and enemy combination, the Sign of Strife can simply jack up every single enemy until they become indestructible hydrogen bombs against your coughing babies. S3 was very obviously not meant to be played without buffs, and yet you are punished if you use any of them. It's way too geared toward veterans. Yes, CC was also veteran-oriented, but it never came to the point where the only clears I see are either maxed out 6 stars or just full meta teams. Risk 18 was hard but accessible. S3 feels like you need to be a sweat that hasn't touched the grass since the game released like me. S3 and A3 to some extent feel way too strict and way too demanding. Let's just say there is a reason if all your favorite challenge and niche nights content creators are doing their stuff in A3 and not S3. At least in A3, after you sit down and grind it, you can find some wiggle room to have cool clears, maybe by abusing the chain mechanic from the boss. S3 has no such thing. You're either a veteran living in your mother's basement, or a whale, or you don't clear it. And don't give me that boo-hoo skill issue bullshit, because the fact it's really hard itself is not the issue. The issue is that these stages achieve their difficulty through extremely jacked enemies. Even if you sit down and try to learn the stage, it's an extremely tedious and frustrating process, because the difficulty is purely artificial. You're not giving me a tough stage layout, you're not giving me interesting and challenging enemy combinations, you're giving me God's strongest Dublin soldier and then telling me to go f*** off. So, as a summary, the Sign of Strife doesn't work because its foundational gimmick of the buffs is implemented so poorly that you could remove it and nothing changes. and because of that, the stages are an extremely frustrating experience. Still, the mode is not offensively bad. Up to A2, the stages are fine, actually. Up to there, I think it's a pretty passable mode, even if it really is just 9 hard stages with no flavor at all. So like, most of it is decent, at least. That's why I think Design of Strife really is just a mode that exists. It could have definitely been done better, and the gimmick doesn't work from the foundation of it, but it's not offensively bad like Pinch Out or Reclamation Algorithm. And Trauma Intervention is very cool, if nothing else. All in all, it feels like Hypergriff is trying to recapture the magic that CC had by doing everything except just bringing back CC. They decided to end CC for literally no goddamn reason, and now they are trying to desperately do that again without walking back on their decision, because Hypergriff has an ego problem. And that's all. Max out your Gummy. Bye. Thank you for watching. I owe you my life, an eternal devotion, but in particular to the channel members shown here right now. And in particular to Niui Takoyaki, Nubupo, Lord Takeo, Come to Brazil, Good Old Leon, Maxios S, and Cronchan but JJF. That's all. Now I will Persona 3 myself.
One after the other, over and over again, I was a new pendulum. Move my left and can't reach like that through the wall, but I can't find